everyone. Welcome to the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library. I'm Asia Clark, the first floor manager here at MLK. I would like to first thank 202 Creates, their family, and the Office of the Creative Affairs for their partnership. 202 Creates works to provide resources for arts, entrepreneurship, and mental health. If this is your first time visiting the reimagined Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library, please come again and visit. You can take a self-guided tour, enjoy the DC history exhibit on the 4th floor, enjoy lunch on the roof, or one of our many adult and children's author talks. Thank you, 202 Creates and the Office of Creative Affairs for thinking of us to host this panel. We look forward to future events and collaborations. I would like now to introduce Kenesha Davey, Associate Director of the Creative Affairs Office with Mayor Muriel Bowser.
Thank you, Asia. Thank you. How's everybody doing tonight? Good. Who is ready to ready, set, and create today? Who doesn't know what that means just yet? Well, hopefully we can all sit and have a great time this evening learning about that together. But as Asia so beautifully said, I am Kenesha Davey, Associate Director for the DC Creative Affairs Office. And I just want to welcome you to our panel today, where we'll be meeting with some wonderful guests who I'll introduce in a second, and be able to talk about some great things about entrepreneurship, about mental health, about just being an awesome creator and growing together, because we need each other, right? Yes, we do. So here at the Creative Affairs Office, we house the 202 Creates program, and we are really under the Cable Television, Film, Music, and Entertainment Office under the direction, y'all just met our beautiful director, Angie M. Gates, and her leadership, along with Mayor Bowser's, we are supporting the creative community in all that we do. I hope you enjoy this wonderful conversation with these great panelists. So we'll be joined by Dr. Mary DeRaedt from GW Counseling Center. And Dr. DeRaedt has been with us as far as doing our Care for Creatives episode since the pandemic. And we've only actually met virtually, a side effect of the pandemic. How many of us have only met people virtually over the past 2 years, right? But we met in person today, so thank you so much for coming out. And we can't wait to talk about all things creative and all things mental health as well. Then we'll be also joined by Gregory Cendana. He was a 202 Creates resident in the past, and he has grown so much. He has done wonderful things. He's an author now. Everybody clap it up. He's an author. Go ahead. We'll hear some of those great things. And then last but certainly not least, Keyonna Jones. She's an amazing visual artist. They'll do much better introductions of themselves as well, but she has our art center in Ward 8, but she also is our recent Mayor's Arts Awards Community Arts Advocate winner. So clap it up for Keyonna. Yes. So thank you all for being here, and let's get to it. Ready, set, and create. All right.
So I guess we'll get started by just introducing ourselves.
Okay.
And so as Kenesha said so eloquently, I am Dr. Mary DeRaedt, and I am the Director of School Counseling in the George Washington University Counseling Department. And I am the co-creator of the Care for Creatives program. My intention was just to really be able to provide the creative community with mental health support in a way that was accessible. And our community conversations have been so wonderful as a way of just getting mental health content out for people to understand and to access, and talking to some of the most amazing creatives. I have to say, it's been an opportunity for me to meet so many amazing people in this city, including Gregory and Keyonna. So with that, I'm gonna toss it over to them.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gregory, Allan, Datu, Cendana. You can just call me Greg. My pronouns are he, him, his, or siya, which is a gender-neutral pronoun in Tagalog, which is one of the languages of the Philippines. I serve as the president and co-founder of Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting. I'm the chief creative officer of Greg Dances. I'm a dancer. And also the co-founder of the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation. You heard Kenisha also mention that I'm an author. I recently published a book called Be the Boss Now, which is my guide from the lessons I learned on starting my own business. And then we also recently launched a accompanying podcast that also interviews different entrepreneurs from a diverse set of backgrounds. I'm super excited to be here today, and thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Hey, Greg.
Hey.
Peace, family. How y'all feeling? Good. Y'all got to work with me because I'm not used to all the lights and the camera and stuff, so bear with me while I get comfortable. My name is Keyonna Jones. I am the founder and executive director of Congress Heights Arts and Cultural Center. It's one of the baddest spots in Ward 8. First and foremost, we are an art gallery that supports Black and brown artists specifically. We do programming and workshops, but we also collaborate with other great organizations that do programming workshops but need space. And then we triple as a rental space for our community because there's not a lot of it. So we have an amazing gallery floor. We have some office space and a bad rooftop. I think one of the only rooftops in Congress Heights right now that you can rent at least. But then also outside of that, I'm a full-time artist. I do tattoos. I'm a muralist. I had the opportunity of being one of the muralists for the Black Lives Matter mural, and that kind of catapulted me into doing murals around the city and out of the city. I do canvas work. Had some recent collaborations with the Commanders and the Mystics. And then outside of that, I'm a full-time mother of 2, so they definitely keep me busy. I'm really excited to be here. I already know why they paired us together, so I think the conversation is going to be really good, and I'm excited to get started. Thank y'all for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I know one of the things that we maybe could start off with is just really diving into this idea of what is creativity. It's such a broad term. And actually, as I was thinking about that today, I did a discussion with Easy Street a few months ago. Yeah, he was awesome about play. And one of the things we talked about was that when you are in a creative space, that is play. That is your brain playing. So I wonder, I've been trying to cultivate that more in my own life since we had that conversation. So I'm wondering for both of you, what is creativity to you?
Creativity for me is a savior, honestly. I always say sometimes words just cannot, they're not enough to how we feel or what we want to express. And so I think being creative and having art is one of those tools that can really help us express ourselves. Being in Southeast, I think that's why the art gallery kind of self-manifested itself, which really also connected me back to my inner child and the healing that I needed. We have a mission to use art to expose, educate, inspire, and especially heal our community. So I think that's why I put it that way. Savior, it's just creativity. You can go anywhere with it. Art is a universal language. It's for anybody and everybody. You don't have to be a certain person. You don't have to have a certain amount of money. You don't have to look a certain way. So for me, it's just that safe space to really feel.
That definitely resonates. I like to think of creativity as like a practice and a way of being, and something that I feel like I think as young people, in our youth, we get a lot of proactive space or ability to do that. And I think, at least in my experience, I have found that society or the conditions around us kind of force us to either hide create the creative energy within us, or the conditions are we aren't allowed or aren't given the permission to be able to foster or bring that creativity to in our lives. And sometimes I try to think to myself, like, even when I wake up in the morning as I'm having breakfast, how am I encouraging my creative self? How am I in between my Zoom meetings doing a little dance break and just listening? I'm still listening to Beyonce, but whatever song or music that will get you going, like, how do you actually integrate that to kind of support and foster the the place of being and also the practice of creativity.
I have to say, Greg, since our previous conversation, I've started doing more dancing. I have started incorporating it in between my Zoom meetings because it is such a great, expression. And I think just to piggyback off what both of you were saying, something that came up in a previous conversation that I had kind of realized that for me, you could kind of get put in this idea that creativity is about just drawing or painting or some sort of physical expression. And so I think for me, I've been kind of indoctrinated with that. I'm not good at that. But my creativity comes out in talking to people, in thinking of new ways to help people and help people think of things creatively, and working with, diverse populations of people who have just lots of different ways of thinking, and trying to understand that and be creative in how I engage in that. And then it kind of brings up another question, which is, that's my profession, right? So we have an aspect of our creative self that is our professional expression, and then we have our personal creativity. And I guess I'm wondering if both of you could speak to how you kind of manage that balance, or how you engage in it. Keyonna, I see your face.
Let Greg take this one first.
I actually envision a world where those aren't separate, that we could actually be the fullest expression of who we are and our identities, no matter what space we're in, whether it is our workplace, whether it's in our homes or in our churches or places of worship or in our communities. And so a question I ask myself a lot is, okay, how can I make the conditions, and how can I inspire more people to be able to be their full selves, like no matter what it is? And so I'll give you an example. I'm a dancer. I was a part of my high school, college dance team. I even started a dance team here in DC. And I always was like, okay, but when I'm in dance practice, I'm in dance practice. And I'm like, when I'm in a performance, I'm in performance. But I won't bring that into my day job. And what I found was that dance was such a healing thing for me that it actually helped me navigate my day job, when I was like, actually, no, like, I'm a dancer. Y'all gonna have to deal with me dancing and on my way to to my desk at the time when I was going into the office. And it actually invited and welcomed and gave others the permission to be like, okay, well, you're a dancer. I do this. Let me show you. Let me share with you my poem. Let me share with you this piece of art that I painted. And I appreciated that, because I think it allowed us. It actually created better conditions for us to actually do the work, but also to be able to see each other like as humans and as whole, versus as these siloed or separate pieces, which I don't necessarily think is the most conducive to kind of the bringing that holistic self and energy in any space that you're in.
Oh, I'm glad I let you go first.
No, that was powerful.
Because, and it really made me feel better about what I was trying to find about separation, because I was like, there really is no separation. Most people that know me know that I'm South Side down to the bone. Everybody knows that, that I am a creative wherever I go, whether you see it in my clothing or it's just my vibe, right? And I think it's important to be able to have that fluid expression in any space, in every space, because I think before I used art as this healing tool, when I was in this dark space and like really fighting who I was and my sexuality and all these things, and trying to have these places where I'm segmented in the office place, or who I am at home, or who I am around close friends, I got into this space of like just being a serious people pleaser, right? Mm-hmm. And then I realized that I was serving everybody outside of me. And I think that's also what just brought me to one of my biggest brands, is about face yourself and be yourself before you face yourself, and just really being accountable about who you are and how you show up in the world, and also being accountable about what you're allowing in your space, right? Whether those things are making you become smaller, or whether it's to dim your light. And I think, like you said, when you're coming up as your whole self, you really inspire people. Like, I hear people all the time just like, I love your vibe, or it's just like the energy. And I think that's the other thing about creativity. It's just the energy flows, and it's very transferable. So I think, thank you for saying that, because I'm my whole self wherever we go.
I definitely appreciate that. And one thing that I also like to share with folks is, I believe in like what I call spheres of influence. When we are able to heal, when we are able to be our truest, most whole versions of ourselves, we can then be in better relationship with other people. We're not projecting, or we're not necessarily, to your point, not always people pleasing, but we're like saying what we feel, speaking our truth. We're kind of asserting boundaries and owning those decisions. And I think that creates stronger relationships with each other, but therefore, as part of communities, as part of organizations and institutions, those are inherently strengthened as well as we do our own work, as we find more creative time, and therefore are in better relationship with other people.
Yeah, it creates a more authentic world, I think, just by being yourself.
Yeah. So do you think that, I love this idea of kind of bringing our whole self into the moment and into everything that we do, and being okay with that. And it's making me think of a lot of the mental health implications for that, which are powerful, right? That a lot of the issues that people are dealing with now are fragmentation of self. And this idea that when we are able to bring our whole self into everything we do, I would guess that our mental health improves, that we are much more able to cope. And there's a term that I love that is kind of gaining prevalence in the mental health community, that is the body budget. And it's this idea that our body is kind of making decisions about what to put energy into all day long. And when our emotional state is reduced, it's spending all our energy trying to manage the emotional state. When if we're just bringing everything into every moment, then our body budget is probably going to be a little more balanced and able to engage.
Look, I'm trying to be body rich. I'm trying to be body rich. Yeah, I love that. I love that that term, body budget, because I think it also is very conducive about boundaries, right? And I was sharing with you before, and a lot of people that know me, I've been very transparent about my healing journey and what that has looked like. I went to therapy for 4 years. I didn't even know you could graduate, child, but I was just like, once that happened, and now that I look back on all the work that I've done, it just makes me really proud to have those boundaries and to know what you're saying, when to chill out a little bit and when to fill up my cup in order to pour back into my community and pour back into my children, because there was a lot of things that I was just giving effort to that just really drained me, and people that weren't coming back with that reciprocation, right? And I tell people all the time, as a giver, you have to really know what that budget looks like, right? Because at the end of the day, as a giver, we're going to give. And there's people in the world that are takers. So we have to be able to have that boundary and make sure we ain't getting broke in the body. That's crazy.
It's a good entrepreneurial term, right? It's your body budget. You have a work budget and a body budget.
Yeah, pay me, baby. Pay me.
You got to pay yourself.
Yeah, it also reminds me of the idea of just the different dimensions of our health and wellness, right? So like you talked about mental health. I also think about our physical, like mental, emotional, even like our environmental or even financial health, and how I have to be mindful, like, even though I'm a dancer and I love to dance, like, I have to, as it relates to my body budget or even these other dimensions, how am I also finding balance and also caring for those other places? Because I think I can jump to, like, all right, well, I'm just going to play this song and I'm just going to be in my groove. I'm going to be in the mirror just doing my choreography. But I actually need to be mindful of the other ways in which my life is being impacted with these other dimensions.
Right.
And so I think that is also an important reminder for myself, that especially because my creative energy flows in a particular way, that doesn't necessarily, like, I have to just find the balance and make sure that I'm giving attention and being responsible and holding myself accountable for the other aspects of my life too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the other part that we have to talk about, because what I realized when I was going through my healing journey, I was looking for places that like really talked about the truth. Everybody just talks about, oh, yeah, I went through a bad place and now I'm here. Started from the bottom, now I'm here. But nobody talks about that in between from the bottom and here. Like, we just skip this whole part. And I think that it's really important when we say we're bringing our whole selves and we're really looking at the full budget, that we have to recognize those dark places, right? That shadow work that doesn't feel good, that gets a little lonely, that gets a little dark, that gets a little intimidating. But those are the pieces that really make the difference in the person. When we really take time to get into those places and invest in that part of the body and those dark places and try to switch them, take the red to the green, and it gets rough. But we have to talk about it, and you have to really be diligent and dedicated to it. And it's only work that you can do, honestly. But I think that's the part that we get scared of and don't want to talk about. And it's a real part. It's a real thing that happens to everybody, right? Don't be ashamed of the deficit parts, the parts that are in red.
Yeah. I appreciate that too, because I think one thing that I've noticed as we are trying to reemerge, starting to do more things in person, is this is to also allow myself to grieve. I'm grieving. I mean, yes, we've lost grieving not just people, because we've lost a lot of folks to COVID and a lot of the additional stress and challenges that we're navigating because of the pandemic. But I also think grieving previous ways of being, grieving previous ways of living, working, being in community, and even grieving like the relationships that there were some relationships I was able to maintain, but there were some relationships I wasn't able to maintain because of our physicality and just how far we were, or also because as I was navigating the pandemic and trying to figure out how I was gonna stay safe and healthy, that meant that I wasn't able to engage with the same number of people, and not going to events or having in-person things meant that I wasn't just bumping into folks that I would see more regularly. And so I think allowing myself to grieve and also holding space for others to do that. Because I think because of capitalism, because of the ways in which we're kind of forced to be like, okay, we got to get to work, we got bills to pay, that we sometimes don't allow ourselves the time to be like, wow, like I lost this person, or I lost this way of being. And even when we are given new opportunities, like even the good, we have things to grieve. Like when you get a new job, when you have a new place to live, you are still grieving something. Yeah, that transition is, and the grieving of what once was still is there. And so I think it's also important for us to just normalize that that's also part of life, that the grieving and the challenges, sometimes when we do feel like there's a deficit, that those are all part of the collection of the experiences that allow us to be the full person that we are in this moment, and to like own that and to be okay with that, because that's also what I feel like connects us all. Like we all pay taxes, we all were born, we all gonna die, but we also have these shared moments of grief and joy, and how do we actually be together in those moments as well?
Absolutely. Greg, I need your book.
Right.
I'm taking it in tonight. It's so important. I think that's one of the things that's happening in the mental health field right now, is that there aren't enough therapists, there aren't enough psychiatrists, there aren't enough people to help, because we are all struggling with this transition back to work, back to in-person, and just the idea that if we were able to kind of be a community for each other, be present for each other, and acknowledge the loss that we've all experienced, and some of the losses that we're not even, as you so eloquently pointed out, really thinking about or recognizing, because there are some new good things too. But allowing ourselves to grieve those things, kind of our brains tend to hold on to those things until we actively let them go. I always say that our brain is Teflon for good things and Velcro for bad things. So it like holds on to the bad things to remind us. So we have to actively seek to let them go. And if we don't even know to do that, then we just hold on to all those bad things for a really long time. So absolutely, that grieving aspect of it. Do you both feel like kind of this transition period back into being in-person entrepreneurs, in-person creatives, that it has drained you? That there are things you're doing now to help you kind of grieve those losses, engage more effectively, and kind of take care of your mental health?
I think for me, no, they do not drain me, because again, during the process of like the pandemic, for me, child, so at the art gallery, I am a one-woman band, and I have been so for 7 years. And again, like having my kids, and so being shut down for me was like whew, thank you. Let me kick my shoes off, because I really needed a break, and I didn't realize how burnt out I was. And I think that was also the time that I really tapped into my own artistry and my own creativity, and just had time to just breathe and release and tap into all these things. And so I think in that space, learning these boundaries, learning what rest looks like and what it feels like, rest. And knowing that it is something that is my right to have, right? And that I don't have to feel guilty about it. And I think in that moment, it was just like, okay, everybody's at home, so you don't have to feel bad about, all of that. So now coming back into this space is really about training my mind to make sure that I still get that rest, like reminding myself what it feels like to rest. So I think now it's really great to be back in person and back connecting with people, but I also have a better understanding about how to balance what my life looks like instead of flowing back into that burnout, because I refuse to be burnt out again. Because it's almost like a GPA. Like it's very fast to drop to an F. But baby, if you try to work back up to that A, it's a lot of work. And I just refuse to go back to being burnt out. So it's just really important now for me to navigate and just see what that balance looks like being back outside.
Yeah.
Back out. Okay.
Let me not get you started. Beyonce, child. Got him in a chokehold.
I would say that I think I agree that it was a reminder that to find that balance, but also like the way that my body is reacting to being back in person, my level of what I can handle is just very different. Like before, I would be like, okay, well, I'm gonna go to this event, I'm gonna go to this showcase, I'm gonna do this performance, and I'm gonna do this, and I'm not trying to go back to that. And so for me, it was like, okay, all right, we're starting to do things in person. Like, how do I actually calibrate and figure out, okay, how much time do I actually need for myself to recuperate to be able to be my full and best self when I'm out at these in-person events or at event conferences or convenings or whatnot. And so that's one thing that I'm like trying to figure out and relearn for myself is like, all right, you love this, you get a lot of energy out of being around people, and like you have to be mindful about how much of this you're gonna do so that you can be mindful of your body budget, but also be mindful of being able to give what you can in the best way possible for any given moment. And then I think I've also used it as another reminder to be like, well, how could I also integrate more of my creative energy and self in small ways in other places, even if it's not necessarily a meeting or event. And so even as I am, I did a retreat last week. I facilitated a retreat for this organization and their board and their staff of their organization. And I did a dance check-in. I did breathing exercises. I did like a lot of somatic like body, like basically inviting folks to actually just feel their breath and like to like recognize the different things that were coming up for them when I said different words or phrases. And like, that wasn't necessarily what my intent was per se, for the outcome of the retreat rather, but that was a small way of trying to integrate and bring that into what I was just doing each day. And I think it also allowed and gave folks permission to be like, oh, it was nice to actually feel that and to actually get out of what the normal way of being was, and like in some ways reimagine or vision like, okay, what else could this look like for me? And what else could this look like, not just in this physical space that we're in, but in how I spend my day and my time each and every day.
Yeah, I think that maybe I'm halfway between two of what you're saying, because I think that from a mental health perspective, I'm an extrovert. I am someone who before the pandemic was very out, doing things, engaging, and at first it was really hard for me, but I adapted. And I think that sometimes we adapt without recognizing that we're adapting. It happens so slowly that we're not consciously aware that we're kind of slow. It's like the analogy of the frog in the boiling water. You know, that if a frog is put in warm water, it will sit. And then if you slowly turn the heat up, it will boil to death because it adapts to the increasing temperature until it dies.
You learn something every day.
I know.
Didn't know that about frogs.
If you drop it in a boiling water pot, it'll hop right out and survive. So it's this interesting idea that as we sit in it, we don't recognize how much it's impacting us. And I think for me, this past spring was an opportunity to go, yeah, this has impacted me more than I thought it was impacting me. And I really need to take stock of my body budget, take stock of, some burnout, and really pay attention to taking care of myself in some of these moments. and recognize that now the challenge is getting back into the life, getting back into, like I was saying earlier, like teaching in person and engaging in person in different ways, and recognizing that now that shift is going to be something that I need to do.
No bankruptcy. That's my burnout.
No bankruptcy.
To the body budget. Yeah, bankruptcy. No bankruptcy.
No bankrupting our body budgets. So I guess one of the other things that I was wondering kind of from both of you, which is a challenge. I asked this question because it's a challenge I've heard many creative entrepreneurs talk about, which is kind of when you start like using your creativity as your monetary source. Does it change your relationship to it? Does it change its ability to support you? In terms of your emotional state, I should say. And how do you navigate that?
For me, so a lot of my artistry has come from hobbies, and being like transparent about it, sharing it with social media, and then people are like, oh, I love that. How much? And it's like, okay, let's figure out how to, monetize this if it's worth it, right? And I mean, that's been so many things, from sage sticks. I used to make candles and body rubs, and now I do tattoos, make clothes, all this type of stuff. And I think, at least for me and some of my artistry, it just depends on how much passion I have to it. I know a lot of them were just like, oh, I was kind of bored and we just needed to do something because we were in the house. But then, and it takes so much labor. A lot of stuff I do just takes a lot of labor. So sometimes, if that one thing is really popping, it can create a burnout, because it's still like, I want you all to have it, but then it takes a lot of work for me to do it. And so the crazy thing is, most people would never believe this, but I cannot stand paint. And I'm a whole mural artist, right? And it's just, so trying to get in the mindset to like really get in that creative move can be difficult sometimes, because it's not just the medium that I want to do, but these commissions come in and that's just what it is. So there's always different ways, and I'm trying to make sure my mind is staying creative. And a lot of that is really staying around inspiration, whether it be other creatives that are just moving and grooving and just being in the space with them. And it's like, it's a domino effect. And it's like, oh, you working on something? Okay, girl, let me work on this. And then a lot of it is also just what I intake on social media, like just making sure that all of the content is always creative or spurring my mind to do something, and keeping my creative just moving and buzzing. But yeah, sometimes it does get a little difficult, because like, y'all want how many of these? Oh.
Yeah, I one thing that I'm learning, and I think still continuing to grapple with, is like, I think it also is about, to your point, Keyonna, like how are we actually talking about it and owning that this is part of who we are and this is something that we believe we're good at. Because I think that it's this level of, because I think where I sometimes get challenged is like, okay, well, how do I put a monetary value to something that I care so much about, or that I've put so much time in? And it was like the passion, the energy, and I was inspired in a particular way. And so I also think it's about the purpose in which, maybe the context in which the art or what it was being made for. And so there's some times where I'm like, I'm doing this for myself, or maybe to share on social media, maybe to help people understand maybe a story or experience that I had. But there are some things that maybe I am trying to monetize. And so being clear on that and being okay that even if there are people saying, well, how much is that? Or can I get that? And I'm actually like, that's actually not for sale. That's not for sale. That was, for a different purpose and reason, and being clear, like, but these are the ways you can support me in my business. And so I think that has been a learning lesson, and that has been about like being proud of the creative energy that I'm able to offer, and also that this is a part of me. So saying I'm a dancer, saying I'm a facilitator or author or whatnot, and owning that more, I think is something that I'm learning to do. And it's easier, or I feel supported when I'm around other creatives or other folks who are also kind of navigating that journey as well. And so that would be, I would like plus one, or like also add that, like, that's an important part of this process and journey. And also, especially folks who are in different fields or like communicate or different kinds of art. So like for myself, while I'm a dancer, it's great to be around other dancers, but I love being around poets and other kind of visual artists, painters, muralists, etc. And so trying to continue to diversify and push myself to like recognize that creative energy comes in different ways, and I may be inspired or may find some way of may find some connection or like ability with other folks that actually helps sharpen or makes me be a better dancer or creative in other places in my life too.
Yeah. I really appreciate what both of you are saying, because I think that kind of from the mental health perspective, one of the things that we tried to do with the therapy for care for creatives was to incorporate art therapy and creativity into some of the interventions that are provided through that program, because I think that as creatives, that aspect of monetizing your creative output can be really valuable, but it can also kind of take away or detract sometimes from the mental health benefit that comes from expressing that creativity. And kind of talking earlier when we were talking about kind of the dark places that people go, and using kind of your creativity to work through some of those dark places. But sometimes it can feel like, well, wait, you're just telling me to do my work for therapy. So being able as a creative, it's a challenge, I think, to be able to separate those two things sometimes and utilize your creativity just for your own benefit, for your own mental health, to fill your body budget.
Yeah, I was going to say at the center, we push this whole idea of entrepreneur. And I think it's just really important, especially for our people in our community, east of the river and southeast, to one, know that, yes, they can use their art to express themselves, because we got a lot of things that we need to express from, but also demystifying this whole philosophy of the starving artist, right? Letting them know, not just letting them know, but also creating spaces for them to be able to sell their work, to know what having a W-9 looks like, really just nurturing the artist and the creative and the entrepreneur, to let them know and support them, and not just creating just because you feel, but also understanding what prices look like, right? And understanding that you can make a profit from your passions, and to really find the value in that, not just because, oh, you're trying to sell it, but not like you did work for this. There was labor, there was supplies, and really teaching our community how to thrive off art. So yeah, I think it's really important.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that kind of connection you're making, because I think that transition from it being a hobby or something that you do when you have free time to how do I change this to be the way in which I'm able to make a living is I think a transition that sometimes, at least for me, it was hard to, I kind of felt comfortable, like, okay, well, I want to make sure I have a guaranteed paycheck, and I want to make sure maybe I have some kind of health care, and if I do this, then I have to rethink, like, what does this look like? And it was important to be pushed, and I will give credit to 202 Creates, the residency program I participated in 2020, 2021, that it actually inspired me to be like, no, you can do this, and there are other models and other folks that have actually done this in different ways, and so how can you take this for yourself and do it for what you're wanting to do with your life and making a living in that way? And so that really like helped me launch Greg Dances and really take that to a different level. And so thank you to 202 Creates for that opportunity. But also to the community of folks that you all bring together, because it was that energy and the vibes from other folks that like really inspired me to be like, okay, Greg, not only can you do this, but other folks are doing this too, and you can do it together. And that for me just lends itself to like interdependence, and the fact that I don't actually believe in self-made folks. All of us come with some kind of help, whether it's the family or the caregivers that raised us, whether it's the people who picked the fruit and vegetables that we could actually eat for our meals. And it's really humbling to remind ourselves that a lot of people actually, it takes a lot of people for us to have a lot of the things that happen in our lives, even if you don't always see them in front of you. And so I think being in creative spaces is definitely a reminder of our interdependence and how much we should be relying more on each other. And yes, I believe in self-care, but what about collective care and community care? And if we actually cared as much about our neighbors and the most marginalized and oppressed people, that our world would just be such a different place.
Amen.
So it's this is an invitation for myself and for others to lean into this collectivity, to lean into the idea of interdependence, and to humble ourselves enough to know that we didn't just get this far because we just happen to be dope human. Like, no, actually, a lot of people, even if you don't give them credit and where it's due, like, actually, we're such an integral part to you getting here. And so how do we actually just be more open and proactive? Like, look, not only can I do this, but let me help share with you, or let me share a lesson I learned, or let me tell you about a mistake I made and it fell on my face, and I'm still kind of learning from it. So
Collaboration over competition, and if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. That's that.
Awesome. We had one more question, but I want to end on that because I just want to keep taking it in. So I think that at this point, thank you both so much.
Thank you. You're great.
And we're going to open it up to questions, and I'm sure that our audience has some things to ask. Rita will.
Thank you. This is a great conversation. Can you tell us more about the residency program and elaborate a little bit on that for people that may not know what it is?
Yes, of course. So the 202 Creates residency program, I think using some of your language of like entrepreneurs, basically supports folks through a variety of networking sessions, workshops with a variety of artists and entrepreneurs, and teach you different life lessons and skills that are helpful in actually being able to take your business, take the creative energy through your business. And one thing, I remember one particular session where there was lots of discussion, was just like, you talked about like, what is a W-9? What does it mean to actually establish a limited liability corporation, and what are the tax implications, and bringing in experts and folks with different expertise to kind of answer questions, but also like let us know that like a lot of other folks actually don't know some of these things either, and they're just kind of like going along, and that's okay, and that somewhat to not lean into the fear, but lean into the possibility. And that was such a big thing that I took from the 202 Creates program, residency program.
I wasn't in the program, but I have had the honor of doing some programming for the program. And I think one of the things that I just really enjoyed about, and it's just 202 Creates in general, is that it's just really a creative community, right? And you meet so many different creatives that are doing so many different things, that have been doing them either for a couple of years or for decades. And you can really just tie into a community. And then again, like he said, just really bring you into that creative economy fold, like just understanding what it is, how you get in there, the different resources that you can tap into, not just through their agency, but the other departments and the agencies underneath the mayor. So it's a really fire program. If you're creative, you're trying to get into some artistic things, you need some support, you need some resources, these are your people, I'm telling you.
So good evening. Thank you for this conversation. I have a question, and I'm going to invite you to be creative with your answer. So you've talked a lot about what you give to your community, and however you want to define that. My question is, what do you need from your community? However you define your community, it could be from schools like ours, George Washington. It could be from, your neighbor down the street. It could be from the Black community, Chicano community. As creatives, if you had no restrictions, if they're, forget capitalism, forget all that, forget the patriarchy and anti-Blackness and the things that we live under, to help you, what do you need from your community?
I love that question, and I know you did say that you were going to invite me to be creative, but then I'm going to throw it back out at y'all to be creative with my answer. And really, I'm going to leave it as flat as support, because that could look so many different ways. That could mean you buying my art personally. That means you could be at my art gallery renting from us, renting the space. That means you could be in the art gallery buying the art that we have from other creatives. We're a nonprofit, so that means a donation. That means you could retweet something on social media. Whatever your support looks like, then that's what we're taking. In-kind, monetary, just support.
The first thing that comes to mind is solidarity. and the willingness to be able to build like authentic, real, genuine relationships with folks in community. I also would invite or ask folks, part of the way to support me is to support yourself. And what does it mean to actually foster healing in yourself? What does it mean to break generational trauma and curses that have been passed down? And what does that then mean for how you can then be in better relationship with me, but also other folks in your homes, in your communities, in your schools, places of worship and work. And so those are things that I think I would ask for in terms of support.
Doctor?
Well, I'm not the creative.
You creatively helping people.
That's true. That's true. I think that something that Greg said resonated with me in terms of support, which is I think that from my perspective, the more we each take an active role in our own mental health and helping ourselves to feel more connected and engaged in the community, the better the community is. So you are helping and supporting us by taking care of yourself, because that creates a healthier environment that we're all swimming in. So I think that would be my short answer to that.
Off the backs of that, can I get y'all to indulge me for a second? Yes?
Yes.
Please repeat after me. Be yourself.
Be yourself.
Face yourself.
Face yourself.
Pace yourself.
Pace yourself.
Healing starts within.
Healing starts within.
Facts, thanks.
Facts, thanks. Oh.
How you guys doing?
Amazing.
My name, and that's to everybody in here tonight. My name is Joseph Jackson. I am a Ward 8 resident. I run 2 companies.
Southside, we outside.
Thank you, Southside, we outside. I run 2 companies. One is called Go-Go Ventures, where we do go-go events throughout the city, and we also distribute go-go music nationally. Secondly, I run something called Jumpin' Jacks Kids Parties events. I've been in talented and gifted in arts programs since I was in elementary school. As a fellow creative and a fellow artist, I want to know, in your particular field, have you guys had any success in trying to bridge the gap between what's going on in the streets with our youth and the particular art that you're in? Because that's one of my biggest challenges today, is trying to get the kids interested back in go-go, trying to get them interested in musicians and singing and acting and dancing. And I'd just like to know if you guys have had any success with that, and if you have, what was your approach?
It's hard, brother. Let me tell you, it's hard. And I have my daughter is 11, so I think that's the biggest place that we have to be creative, right, is trying to engage our youth. I have had success, I would say. I'm the VP of another nonprofit called the Creative School. And it started in Stanton Elementary in Southside. And at first it was like a boys' institute, but then we realized that they were really enjoying and active in the things that we were doing. And we call them the Kings and the Queens. Well, the Queens was getting upset because everything was for our many kings. So the program ended up leaving the school and started as a whole nonprofit. But the way we succeeded, or the way that we are succeeding, and I think this is the biggest thing, is that we let the youth lead. We don't guess for them. We don't just pop up with stuff that we don't know for sure that they like. So they tell us. They're the ones that are designing all the programs. They're the ones that are running it. They have a podcast program. They have fresh pressed juice that they press for themselves. I helped them start a clothing company. They play chess. If you were there this weekend for Art All Night, they had a whole section where they do their own thing. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is that we got to stop doing this guesswork. They're right there. We don't have to. We ask them what they need, what they want. Just like this young gentleman said, whatever you could think of, what would you want to do? And we do our best to facilitate and guide them to those things. And it's been a pleasure to see them grow. I've known some of them since they were like 5 or 6, and now they're teenagers. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is just really connect with them and don't do the guesswork, just communicate.
I think one thing that I would add, at least from my experience, and one thing that I actually experimented with during the pandemic was I realized as folks, especially early on in the pandemic, when folks weren't able a lot of children, young folks weren't able to go to schools, and parents were like, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to navigate this. And so I actually did virtual dance classes for children. And I actually invited them to say, okay, we're gonna spend time together. What songs you all want to do, or what are some ideas of songs you want to use, or what moves do you do when you think of dance, and actually incorporate some of their moves and the songs they chose as part of the choreography, so they could actually see part of their inspiration as part of it, and did that for quite a bit of time, and it ended up not continuing it, but it allowed for folks, and a lot of people are telling me this inspired folks to take classes in a studio. This inspired folks to actually try to choreograph on their own or take dance breaks on their own. And I think that was a reminder that, like, even if you just find ways to just plant seeds of imagination and give people time to even just say, like, this is actually what it could look like, or this is how an idea of what you could do, that naturally they have found ways to feel that or do that in other ways. Even if me as the creative, or as a person that was help hold a container or create a space for them to kind of feel that I don't necessarily have to be the person that's actually holding that for them ongoing, that they are able to do that themselves. And in some ways, to your point, builds on kind of their agency and sense of empowerment, that, like, yes, this is something that I like to do, or this is something that I want to do, and here are the ways that I can do it and do it for myself.
I think another good point that Greg reminded me of, it has to be accessible as well, right? And we have to be honest about how much time and how much effort we're really going to put into them, right? So even if we create these spaces, how you going to get them there? Or are they going to be able to get there, right? Are they going to need somebody to take them back home? Like, all these things matter, and I think that sometimes we say that we want to do things, but we get overwhelmed by how much that looks, and we forget about it, or we walk away from it. And that's one of the last things that our youth need. They don't need the fake investment, right? They need somebody that they know that they can count on. And so I think that's the biggest part, because kids are a lot, man. Trust me, I got two, and I just, like, sometimes I do program with other people so that they can handle the kids, because that's just not my lane. I recognize that, right? So I'm in the back somewhere watching everybody, but I think we have to be honest too about what effort and what support that we want to give our youth, so that we don't just leave them out here hanging.
Yeah, and to build on that too, like, accessible also means, like, having interpreters. Accessible means, like, thinking about what are the different learning styles, and maybe some folks need some time to process. So maybe it's better for them to read something, better them to actually watch a video. Maybe it's actually better to try it out themselves. And so how are we making space to allow for folks who have different learning styles, who have different ways of communicating, making sure that we're being as holistic as possible about the ways in which you're creating space, offering space, and thinking about access and accessibility in the broadest sense possible.
Yeah. I think the only thing that I would add to the wonderful things that you've already said is, I'm going to steal something from a new friend that I made tonight, which is that to get to know all these things, we have to listen, right? We have to listen first. We have to demonstrate to adolescents and children that we are in, right? We're in. We care. We actually want you. We see your value. We see your strength. We see what you can offer, and we want to hear about your experience. We want to hear about what you feel like you can offer and what you need. We want to hear about your learning style. We want to hear about how you feel creative and how you don't feel creative. And actually taking that time to sit and have those conversations, and to your point, being present when they need us to fill the gaps, is, I think, what is going to be also very useful.
Dr. Mary, could you take a few minutes and explain more about the Care for Creatives program and how people can sign up and get support?
Absolutely. So the Care for Creatives program is in tandem with GW's counseling department. And we have a counseling center that is on the GW campus on G Street. And we offer pay what you can therapy. So anyone in the creative community, entrepreneurs, can contact either the Community Counseling Services Center online or through creativeaffairsdc.com. You can find a link to get all the information that you need. And basically, you can come in and you can talk to a therapist. You can do a short-term program to kind of target something specific in your life, or you can do longer-term therapy with the student clinicians that are working in our center. And so the idea is to make it accessible, make it valuable, and make it mostly available to anyone that needs it.
Since we are at the library, what books or podcasts do you guys recommend?
Ooh, there's this, let me think a little bit. There's a book, I think it's called Creative Genius. It's a really dope book because it really talks about how creativity is really innovation. And really talks about, it touches on a lot actually. Some of the shadow work stuff that we talked about, the inner child, reinventing, reteaching, relearning. But it's a dope book, Creative Genius.
The first book that comes to mind is We Do This Until We Free Us, which is by an organizer named Miriam Kaba. And she talks about transformative justice. She talks about the abolishing of police and prisons and what it will mean, like what it will take for us to live in that kind of world, which I think is a beautiful vision of how we are actually have to be in different kind of relationship with each other and how we address conflict and tensions that arise. She's also somebody that really speaks to this idea of collective care and community care. And so I would definitely recommend that. And also shout out to the Be the Boss Now book that I wrote. And also a podcast as well, which is basically like a list, a reflection of my own entrepreneurial journey and the steps that it took that I took. And I like to describe it as the guide that I wish I had when I started my business, and would encourage y'all to check that out. And you can find that at bethebossnow.com.
Awesome. I think from a general mental health perspective, there's a book called How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett, and she talks about the body budget in there, but she mostly talks about how our emotions actually come up in our body, where they come from, what they are, and I think that every human on earth should read it because I think it's a kind of like a primer for how your brain and body work together as one. There is another book if you have any interest in exploring trauma and understanding trauma and its impact on your body. One of the best books out there is called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's by Bessel van der Kolk, and it is an amazing book. It's hard. I want to just tell you to plan some self-care if you're going to start reading it because it can be challenging, but it's a really important book for anyone to read. Podcast-wise, I am a neuroscience nerd. I love neuroscience because it's just confirming all of the stuff about our brains and our emotions. But the Huberman Lab is a podcast that he talks about the intersection of our brains, our hormones, our bodies, and how it plays out in terms of our emotional state, our responses to a lot of different things, our sexuality, our gender presentation, all of these different things. So highly recommend that one too.
So really quick before we wrap it up, this is going to be the last question. Are you guys able to tell the audience, one, what's next for you, and then two, how they can find you guys on social media, your website, and so forth?
What's next for me is continuing to teach and doing more community conversations. And I think how you can find me is I am on the GW website. I am on LinkedIn. And otherwise, I'm not too active on social media, but that's how you can find me.
Awesome. I actually was talking about this right before, but my nonprofit organization, Can't Slap Won't Slap Education Fund, is actually launching a particular mental health fund that actually is going to center Black, Indigenous, people of color who are deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, and neurodivergent. And so it will be a program that will actually give them access to free therapy and also train up therapists who aren't as familiar with the deaf-blind, deaf-disabled community to understand the culture and then to also recruit signing therapists as well and connect them to a matching service that will allow folks who are service users who are needing with service providers that are that culturally relevant, can relate to experiences, and then also partner with organizations who are who care about disability justice, racial justice, and getting the word out, but also raising funds for the mental health fund. You all can find me on social media. My handle is at Gregory Cendana, GREGORYCENDANA on all major platforms, and then at CSWS Consulting is my consulting firm.
Y'all can always find me in Southside if you're looking. The art gallery is located at 3200 MLK Avenue. We're right across the street from Engine 25 and up the street from Baloo, some major landmarks. Also MLK Deli, down the street from MLK Deli. We are on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter at CHACC_DC. Please don't call us Chalk. I hate that. We are known as the Center. But you can find us there, also chacc.org. And my personal artistry, I go by KamJ6, which is my initials, but I spell it out everywhere, KAYEMJAY, the number 6, and that's .com, that's Twitter, that's Instagram. What I got next, the center always has something next, so definitely come visit us. I told you I got my boundaries, so you're gonna have to schedule an appointment so I'm not overworked, but definitely come. We got some events coming. You can see all that on our website. And then personally for me, I got some pretty cool commissions that are coming up I can't really talk about, but if you follow me, you'll see them. And if you're at the Commander Stadium anytime soon, I've got 2 murals there, section 125 and section 444. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you guys. How did you guys really love the panel today? Yeah, it was really good, right? I learned some great gems, the body budget. Like, I am going to have to implement that into my life. So thank you all so much. We at the Creative Affairs Office, our director, Angie Gates, myself, I'm Kenesha Davey, my great team here. Everybody, we all thank you so much. Team, just stand up and wave your hands. Just wave your hands if you can. You guys were wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, well, I pray everyone gets home safe. Have a great evening, and thank you again so much for joining us. Bye.
Thank y'all.